And so very good afternoon to the Sportsfan Radio panel and our viewers, and very special guest today, Professor Clare Hanlon from the Victoria University. And Sarah, I believe you've got a couple of questions you want to put to Professor Hanlon. Off you go.
Absolutely. Professor Hanlon, I think I could pick your brain all day, but I will start with the one. I was thinking about reading a bit about you and in your role as Chair of Women in Sport. How do you go about facilitating and initiating research?
Thanks, Sarah. And please call me Claire. I'm on the same wavelength as everyone here. So we all have important views. Sarah, in relation to research and where do we start, basically our focus, and I'm part of the Susan Alberti Women in Sport Chair, and what our focus is for Victoria University and women and girls in sport is to create no boundaries. No boundaries for girls and women to lead and play in sport. And so based on that, we're looking at industry needs. And we talk to industry, we work a lot with industry, and we collaborate with industry to identify what changes are needed and how can we help. What can we do in the background to build capacity of organisations so then they can create the change and encourage more women as to lead, as CEOs, coaches, but also for girls and women to play sport. And a key one that came up, Sarah, was probably the sport uniform research that recently we conducted thanks to Change Our Game program, the Victorian government, where they provided funding and had a look at girls in sport uniforms. Well, really what we found anecdotally, a number of girls reached out to me and women and said, I'm dropping out of sport because I'm not enjoying I'm not comfortable in what I play in. I'm not comfortable. And I don't know whether us as a group have been not comfortable in sports uniforms ourselves, whether it be at school or whether it be in sport ourselves, playing sport. And so we actually did some research and really identify some key no-brainer factors. But here's the evidence for you to then take to your sport organisation and say, hey, we don't want to wear white shorts. We don't want to wear skirts. We want a choice. We want options. And another is, why do we have to wear all the same, i.e., do we all have to wear shorts? Do we all have to wear skirts? Why don't we wear the same sport colours and then have what we want to wear underneath? It might be pants, skirts, shorts. So we're really tossing and working with the industry, and they realised, and credit to many sports where they have changed bylaws and regulations in order to provide options and choice for girls as well as women in what they wear in sport uniforms. Really interesting one, Sarah, was Cadbury, and fantastic. Cadbury and Women's Sport Australia got on board, and they had a 150 grand out to all Australian sport clubs to say, hey, here's some funding to change your sport uniforms and present a 3-minute video as to why you need the funding. Lo and behold, 477 videos later, 3-minute videos later, and it was incredible watching the final cut, the final 100 that we ploughed through as an assessment panel. Honestly, we've got some girls and women that were wearing, they said, this is our, i.e. it was AFL in this case, sport uniform. These are our jumpers. They're the hand-me-downs from the guys the season beforehand. We get the hand-me-downs from the last season where the guys get the new ones. We just want something that fit us because they're wearing T-shirts underneath, and it's a classic. So it's like, well, why are we so archaic? Why can't we be moving forward? And let's look at opportunities to help sports to provide the evidence as to why change needs to occur. So that's one example, Sarah.
No, it's absolutely amazing. And I love that sort of initiative coming from businesses as well, because I know Toyota have done similar things where they had their Good for Footy or Good for Sport grants to help women get uniforms. And even as an example, I play football and netball, two very different uniforms. You go from football, which is basically shorts and a singlet, to a netball dress where you're supposed to be jumping and mostly doing all the stuff except for tackling that you do in football. And you still are wearing a dress to wear under that. And most of the girls I play with, end up buying a pair of footy shorts to wear underneath it anyway. So it is a very interesting conversation, all of the things that go around uniforms, and I'm sure we could talk about it forever as well. But I did also, you mentioned how it ties into the recruitment and the retention of women in sport. What sort of other factors have you come across that are halting being able to recruit and retain these new athletes to clubs?
It varies according to age group. It's a lifespan. When we're talking about girls and women, it's across their lifespan. Think of girls 12 to 14. That's one of the biggest dropout rates of girls in sport. And that's because they're moving from primary to secondary school. It could be due to puberty. It could be during that time is when their lack of self-confidence, they fear judgment. So you have a look at that and how do we encourage and create a fun, supportive, social environment for those girls compared to women who are coming back after a period of time away from sport, and how do we encourage them to come back? And it goes back to girls and women really want social environments. They want to social fun. They want to know the why factor as well. Why is it good for me? And to promote the health and fitness and longevity and how it mentally, socially and physically helps you. I think those areas are really important to show that along the way based on the life stage that people are at. So many people think one size fits all in recruiting, attracting and retaining, and it's not the case. It varies on age group. So Sarah, that could be a very long-winded response if I then break down to age groups. But I suppose my point is it depends on the age group of the person that you then look at attraction and retention.
No,
Sarah,
very
Claire,
true.
just a quick one on the uniforms.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be easy just for Australian netball to come out and say, we'll have an outfit like basketball, like women's basketball and men's basketball, where you just have shorts and a singlet? Isn't it just if and I understand your point around, the difference of uniforms. I can't see any common sense would tell you Australian basketball just has an edict that the outfit will now be basically basketball shorts and singlet or whatever, or a top or a t-shirt.
Yeah,
would it
Greg,
be that easy, or am I just being naive?
No, it's not naive at all, Greg. And I think the more we're aware of it, the better. I must admit, Netball Victoria have really stepped in and they have changed that, Greg, since the evidence that we provided with the research. They have actually changed their association bylaws. The problem is in sport, you've got national, state, associations, and then clubs. It is so tiered. And so, for example, for Netball Victoria, they are now encouraging all their associations with this new bylaw template to say that the girls can wear exactly like you're saying, the bottoms, the same colour, as long as it's the team colour, but they can, in each team, one girl might want shorts, one girl might like to wear a skirt, and another girl is freezing and want to wear, pants all the time. Great, let's do it. So, yes, that's happening in Netball Victoria with what they're encouraging their associations to do.
Claire, I'm just starting on your concept, no boundaries. It sounds simple, but the more you think of it, and this show, I think it's fair to say, we cover a lot of women's sport. There are huge boundaries. Just a couple of notes I've made: uniforms, community attitudes, media, funding, and you could go on, I suspect, all day. Can I just focus on the media? Because I am truly amazed at the lack of coverage of women's sport in all forms of media. Well, the forms of media perhaps that I read and watch. And when you look at the success of women in sport, particularly the Olympics over the last 20 years, you really wonder why this is the case. A, why is it the case? And B, do you think things are improving, Claire?
Oh, I'm a glass half full person, and I do believe they are improving. News Corp's a prime example. They have employed a woman who is a senior editor to encourage more coverage in the News Corp media regarding women in sport. So that's a credit in that context. You have BBC and ABC are prime examples where they're trying to target and put in targets, i.e. 40-60 of reporters, of women and men who are reporting in sport, because you've got a different lens, and that's really important, but also reporting and they've now got they're doing tallies in relation to how often they're reporting in relation to media and women in sport. So I think that's a positive. We need more, though, honestly, John. There's the other media we need to increase. You have a look at your newspapers still, your back pages, your couple of back pages. We need to increase that for the newspapers. We need to increase in relation to the voice of women, and there are more increasing. There's a program, again, it goes back to Change Our Game, the state government. They've just announced 15 women who this is their third year, I think, running, regarding having them as experts in media. Sarah, I don't know whether you're involved in that program, and if not, that is a great opportunity where they increase your expertise in media, and again, trying to encourage that happening. Fortunately for AFL, in some of the channels, we can see that there are women reporting, and again, it's a great lens. So fingers crossed that continues.
Just finally from me, we didn't read out all of your CV because seriously, we're taking up half the bloody show. But one of the things is the Susan Alberti Chair of Women's Sport at VU, and obviously Susan Alberti was very instrumental and very much behind the AFLW. Bit of a Dorothy Dixon, but I suspect that you're fairly happy with the way the AFLW is progressing, particularly with and your connection with the Bulldogs.
Victoria University is strongly aligned with Western Bulldogs, and they're certainly very keen in relation to encouraging more women as leaders in sport. So I was actually talking last week to the respective managers in relation to, well, how can we link stronger together in order to create greater outcomes and impacts for the industry, for the community. So we're in discussions at the moment in that context, going on to talk about Susan Alberti and a dynamic woman who we regularly meet, and we talk about the industry and the needs. Sue is a person that wants things done yesterday based on her encouragement and enthusiasm to create that change. And I think between us, we're certainly hopefully helping and feeding off each other in relation to how we can help create change in the community, but be in the background. Again, it's not in the forefront. Let's be in the background and get organisations to have that ownership and for them to create the change and celebrate what they're doing to encourage more women as leaders, as well as players in sport.
Thanks.
We're at an interesting stage where, for example, why are we needing to do this? And John, it goes back to being glass half full. However, the stats aren't showing that. You've got IE 2019, we had 29% of women who were CEOs in 63 national sport organisations. We had 15% women who were high performance coaches. We only had 9% of women who were coaching at the Rio Olympics. So that's not giving us great stats there. So bring on the next group of what we're doing. We need to increase the number of women, but we need to create an environment that will help them to be in those roles and that's supportive of them in their roles. When we're talking about women, it's not just someone like me who's blonde hair, blue eyed. We're talking about women in relation to the diverse backgrounds that are women representing CEO roles and high performance coach roles or officials. We're a diverse society. Well, where's our diversity? And let's bring that in. And Sarah, it goes back to your point in the context of what research we're doing. I'm heavily involved in research at the moment regarding women and working with women from culturally diverse backgrounds and what encourages them. And sport has a lot to learn from women, i.e. from culturally diverse backgrounds, from disability. We had an example where we did a research around Australia about women who were in sport and weren't in sport, but they aspired, they wanted to be leaders in sport. Really scary finding was that women who weren't in sport but really wanted to lead in sport and aspired to be in sport, they had more negative perceptions about when they get in, what it's going to be like leading, compared to the women that were actually in there and leading in sport. That just shows what image is sport showing or portraying in our industry for it to be inclusive and diverse and encourage women into sport. And I think that's something that we need to look at. And John, it goes back to you making sure that we don't have that male-dominated image in relation to what we're portraying as sport. We need to change. And this is a time where we should be rebuilding and reanalyzing.
I would have thought that commerce will come to your aid, Claire. I truly think that with the increase of female CEOs and female managers, they can actually see the benefit of women's sport. Look, on a strategic level, it's good for their company. You mentioned Cadbury's, but gee, what you look at the women playing sport, and they're a pretty good image to be associated with. Where we've talked a lot in this show about men behaving badly in sport, and a lot of factors that have just let themselves down. But the women are just stepping up all the time. I just find it a no-brainer for commerce to get on board.
Absolutely. Have a look at sponsorship. There are more sponsors looking and seeking women players in sport. Have a look at fans, and there's women are key decision makers in the family. So you need to make sure that you have the women who are satisfied in sport, as fans, as players, as leaders. They are real important lenses that are coming from a family perspective, a female or a woman's perspective and girls' perspective, but also in relation to a perspective which is different to males. And we need both. We can't have an association or a board full of women. We need men. We need the lens of men. It's the same thing. And with that understanding, that's how we're going to grow.
Claire, you were talking about male-dominated coaching positions. How long before the AFL takes the lead and we start seeing a more percentage-appropriate numbers of women being appointed as head coaches of the women's teams?
Yeah, wouldn't that be great, Mark? Bring it on. In relation to having a visible career pathway where women can see this is achievable and the support is there when they become a coach and it retains them, that's when I think it's going to happen. It needs to be strengthened, and we need to have more women who are experienced, because you've got, and this goes back to high performance coaches across sport, Mark, when the positions are open for high performance, the senior high performance role, often you hear the reason why women weren't appointed was because they weren't experienced. Well, let's get them in experience. Let's get them in these roles so then that they are acting as high performance coaches, acting as senior coaches for AFL, whatever it is, because that's where the experience, once they've got that experience, it happens. But where are the opportunities that has that? And I think there's the more sports that showcase women in these roles, show that support is there. Women need, it's like anyone, you need that support, that confidence, and more will keep going. I want to be like that person, and so many are like that.
There I see the Australian Olympic Committee has replaced a pale male with another pale male, and there's only pale males in the standing, and the AFL will no doubt go down that same path. Does that frustrate you, or do you think the time's coming when we'll see more women getting those really top positions in Australian sport?
Would love to see that, full stop. I think with Ian, though, Ian is a great candidate or an appointment in the context of he was the chef de mission. He was a person who has been ground level in relation to athletes and is looking at it from varied lenses. I do think, though, it's the time. How long can a person be in a role for is probably a topic of discussion. For example, do you put a person in and is the maximum 10 years in a role? The person before Ian was in for 32 years from memory. So it's a matter of let's have a look at time that people are in certain roles in order to have a fresh lens, perspective, and input. And I think that's important regardless of where people are.
Claire, look, we really appreciate you coming on and talking about what we believe is a most important subject. What we'd really like to see is other media organisations take up the discussion, because it just seems to me that if more people are discussing it, then more is going to happen.
Yeah, look, can I say well done to you as a team. It is so important. You're getting the voice out there. And the more you get the voice out there, the easier and the more reassuring it is for people saying, hey, there's people out there that have got faith in us. So please keep up the great work. We need you.
Well, we will. And please, you keep up the great work too.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Thanks very much for coming on
Thanks,
today.
Claire.
Take care.
Thanks, Claire.
Bye.
All right, Paul, let's go to you and discuss round 7 of the NRL. And could I perhaps say that the Professor's parlay had already been undone at the races, but how could I say, the upset of the season with the Canterbury Bulldogs beating the Roosters, what happened there?
Well, it seems to be upsets galore in AFL and NRL. I've counted a few already this round. You've got the Eels were belted by the Cowboys, big upset. You've got the Broncos beating the Sharks, big upset. And then you've got, can you believe it, I think they're about $12 to 1 or something, the Bulldogs. They somehow beat the Roosters. Actually, they weren't. They were about $4.50, the Dogs, but they did it. So your boys are up and about.
So the round started on Thursday night, Paul. The Broncos ambushed the Sharks. The Sharks in front 7-6 at half time, and things looked to be going okay, but the Broncos weren't having any of it. Sharks might not be as good as we all thought.
Well, I can tell you something interesting for local listeners. The Broncos, with Adam Reynolds steering the ship, are looking a very different team. They're certainly looking very different in the 8 than they were last year, chasing a player called Cameron Munster, who we'd all be aware of. There's very, very strong talk that they could be adding him to the Adam Reynolds partnership, which would make that 6 and 7 possibly the most potent partnership in the game. So I wouldn't blame the Broncos for throwing in 1.2 million a year. Cameron Munster's been offered $750,000 a year by the Storm. You didn't see better deals in Aldi's first catalogue than that. I mean, if you're going to get Cameron Munster on $700 a year, the form he's in, what the Storm power brokers are probably now thinking, we're a bit regretful that they've put all their money into Jerome Hughes. Pappenhausen's playing out of his skin, and Harry Grant, but unfortunately there's not enough money to go around. But you don't offer your top talent a $500,000 a year pay cut, and that's what's happened at the Storm. So the Broncos are looking very good. There's a lot of talent there. They are the richest club in the game, so there'll be a lot of support behind the scenes, and they're a team to watch because with Adam Reynolds there, they are building a very good franchise, rebuilding a very good franchise.
Paul, how is a player manager also a host of a rugby league program and using that forum to spruik a player?
That's Braith and Asta you're talking about. I found it interesting, a tweet recently. They said SBS has subtitles at the bottom when someone's not speaking English. Can we get them for Braith and Asta? Which I thought was a bit harsh. But he is also a manager of a player, Cameron Munster, who is the hottest player in the game, and he's running a show where they're talking about Cameron Munster's performances. Are there any AFL player managers who do media, or they're separate?
The only one I can think of is Liam Pickering, that does some commentary and also has a show on Saturday mornings with Hutchie. But at the end of the day, he doesn't talk about player contracts or make a statement that they'll be talking to the Brisbane Broncos about 2023 at the end of 23. I think it's unheard of. The subtitle thing, I think you could have that for a lot of the rugby league commentators. Blocker Roach might be at the top of that list. So I just found it fascinating. And you're right, like to take a haircut, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure the off-field stuff with Cameron Munster has assisted him either.
I was just going to say, speaking of commentators, the leader this week has got to be Brian Fletcher. Ready for this singer? I'm not advocating violence, but there's nothing wrong with a bloke being knocked out by a big hit. Now, that's right up there, surely, with Blocker Roach that Balmain's won 3 of their last 4. You can't do any better than that. So that's got to be a conflict. And I know that with the Dolphins, Wayne Bennett's team, their recruitment manager just signed his son. So that's got to be a conflict. But apparently he stepped out of the room when the deal was being done, which doesn't. Yeah, it'd be like Braden Astor stepping out of the studio when they talk about Munster. But as you've said, he's actively encouraging public commentary about how hot his client is and how in demand he is. So I do find it a very strange situation.
Well, the interesting thing with Waif as well, Paul, is that he is the host of the NRL 360, AFL 360 equivalent. It's a sausage sizzle, so there's 4 blokes all over the age of 50 to 60 on the panel. Now, how they missed a trick by not appointing someone like a Danica or you go through a list of the girls that they should have appointed, and yet we've got Waif who's got English as a second language.
Cronk's very good on there. If he's regularly on there. Benji Marshall, our favourite Mensa level genius, is on there as well. He's pretty good. But I take your point that they could have had a bit more diversity. Joey Johns, interestingly, has been relegated to a sideline role by Channel 9, which I found interesting because I've always found his analysis pretty good. Whether there's some personality clashes there at Channel 9, but the Cameron Munster scenario is one worth watching. They wanted to keep all 4. They've kept 3, but they're almost certain to lose Munster to either the Dolphins or the Broncos. And what's going to happen is the Broncos and Dolphins will now be in a bidding war because the Dolphins are desperate to land a marquee signing, and they just haven't got one yet. I did note with interest during the week, David Moffat, the former boss, he was a boss 20 years ago on the Moffcast, he calls it. And he had another cracker. He said, I don't hold grudges. But he said Wayne Bennett is the least liked person in rugby league. He thinks the whole world revolves around him. I'd hate to think what would happen if he did hold a grudge. He's held a grudge longer than the Ming Dynasty. It's 22 years he's still going on about Wayne Bennett. So, so obviously Wayne Bennett's causing a bit of friction. He is at the Storm because he's very keen on he's poached half the Storm forward pack, and now he's after the Storm's best player on the market. So it's causing a lot of friction for a man who's out of the game at the moment, Wayne Bennett.
Paul, can we a player or a coach or ex-player, whatever you want to call him, can we talk about Ricky Stewart? Like one of life's most miserable people.
Yeah.
He's not having a lot of fun at the moment, Ricky, with his Canberra Raiders, and they lost yesterday to the Auckland Warriors, who the week before the Storm put 70 on.
They've been bad. The Raiders have lost 5 in a row, 7 of their last 8. But if you want to look up sour grapes in the dictionary, ready for this little zinger from Rick? I'm as glad they were as bad as we were. Now, how about that for we just lost to a better team on the day, not on his watch. And ready for this one, any real fan that we've got left.
Yeah.
He doesn't think anyone's following them anymore. So you're right about, he's not exactly Anthony Robbins on the inspirational front, Rick, at the moment, I can tell you. So they were woeful, though, the Raiders. That was a shocking loss, really bad loss. They are in free fall, the Raiders, absolute free fall. Great win to the Warriors. No need for Ricky Stewart, but we always try to be positive on the show. It's great to see the Cowboys coach up and about, Todd Payton, someone you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley alone. He's a pretty fiery bloke, Toddy Payton, but they're up into 3rd position now. I did tip them coming last, so I'll get the egg off my face and say they've been a great story this year, the Cowboys, and that is a great rugby league area. So I'm really happy for them. And then we've got the F-bomb, Michael Maguire, who's up and about, because his West Tigers are starting to win again. So that is great for the game that the West Tigers are going well. I watched that last weekend with a mate, and I didn't really mind as much as you might think that my Rabbitohs lost to the Tigers. That Michael Maguire was sacked by everyone. He almost lost the support of the board. we always talk about the support of the board as the death knell. He's there, and the players seem to have found something somehow. Somewhere, and I don't really mind for rugby league. It's great that we have one less basket case.
Paul, you mentioned about the Cowboys. Obviously, they got the coach Todd Payton, who was the interim coach, at the Warriors, and then accepted the job at the Cowboys. Came under a bit of criticism last year around the role playing of Tamalola. And also some of the recruitment that he's made with Seymour being one of them.
Yeah.
But the proof's in the pudding at the moment. We've got a limited source, but it's like they're playing extremely well at the moment, and he's actually getting the best out of some of those players.
He is, and it's great to see. I looked at the table before us, the last 5 games. The only 2 teams that you can see playing the grand final are the Panthers and the Storm. At this rate, they're the only 2 teams who are not showing flaws. You've seen the Sharks shown up this week. You've shown up in terms of not showing up. I mean, shown up as perhaps pretenders. The Eels were dismantled 35-4. So you better believe that Craig Bellamy and Ivan Cleary are smart enough to watch that tape and see what the Cowboys did without discrediting the Cowboys' performance. It's looking like a 2-horse show already, unless someone steps up. My Rabbitohs were good against Manly, but they had a player sent off. I just can't see Manly doing enough to challenge though. But Tom Trbojevic is back soon for Manly. They were gallant against the Rabbitohs with a player sent off very early on for what was an incredibly ugly tackle. It was UFC stuff to start the game. So that was almost a shame for a spectacle perspective. But I do think Manly are still a team that will win the vast majority of their games coming home. They have too much talent there to not finish in the top 4.
Paul, on that tackle, there's been wide-ranging opinions on it, whether it was a send-off, whether it should have been 10 minutes in the bin. He's a good – and we get all the narrative. He's a good bloke. It's not in his nature. Yep. He didn't mean to do it. He got the tackle wrong. His technique's good, blah, 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 blah. Cameron Smith was one that said he thought it was only 10 minutes in the bin.
Yeah. Now,
I would have thought watching it, and it's been in the media and significant coverage of it, if that's not a send-off, what is?
Yeah, the difficulty you've got, it's because they're so big and they're so fast, so strong. And Trevor Gilmeister, who was on, and he's a great tackling proponent and a coach of tackling, it's all about the contact point. If I hit you and you're running at me too low, you're going to tip over. And the problem is because these players are so big and you've got so much speed and strength yourself, the momentum is going to lift them. And it's not like origami. You can't just sort of, or whatever you want to, pottery, you can't just sort of lift them back midair and sit them up and put them on the ground. Once they're gone, it's very hard to not have them land in the direction they've flipped. Now, that's a Defence Council submission, probably with a bit more finesse than I've put it. But it was the problem is you get to a point in these tackles and they say you went on with it. How do you not go on with that? I think it's putting yourself in that scenario where you've flipped them over and then they've got to land somehow. And thankfully for Cameron Murray, who's Rabbitoh's captain, that he didn't land on his neck, or he could have been in the wheelchair like, it's interesting you raised Cameron Smith, like Alex McKinnon. That's how bad it could have been. No,
I totally agree with that. And that's the thing, I think, that you've got to discourage that sort of tackle. The other one that out of the weekend as well, Paul, I'm not sure you've seen it. I think one of the more spineless people in the NRL is a man called Matt Lodge. Now, he's had his issues both on and off the field. Yesterday, in the game, the Warriors versus the Raiders game, he led with an elbow.
Yeah.
He got a penalty against him, but again, was not sent to the sin bin for that. And then later in the game, he gets touched on the head, goes down, and gets a penalty that evens the scores up. Now, that's character, I think, at the end of the day, for a person to be actually doing that. But I think from a game's perspective, I think there's an issue at the moment around if you're touched high, you will try and milk the penalty and stay down.
Yeah. Well, you saw the Tupou hit that should have taken his head off. And I think, ironic, but the crime almost was that he got up, the player that he almost took his head off. So if a player goes down like they've been hit by a Hezbollah rocket, then it seems they get the penalty and that's to their team's advantage. But if they heroically keep playing, then they don't get the penalty that should have been coming their way. I do agree with you. If you hit someone high, whether it's laziness or intentional, there should be a penalty. But it is a grey area about sin bin as opposed to the tackle, because there was a lot of talk about the intent of that tackle, the Manly player I'm talking about, the intent as opposed to whether he actually pulled him into a position where he could have been left a quadriplegic or a paraplegic. That should be, I think, the deciding factor, not whether you've got menace in your eyes or if you've got a bad character or a long rap sheet.
And Gelding, of course, we will look forward to Peter from Racing New South Wales stepping up this week, or if it is something that's a little bit harder, I think we'll see Andrew Elder come out this week, Paul. So I haven't seen Peter from Racing New South Wales recently.
We had his Mickey Mouse on ears recently because he's talking up the game to Disneyland, or not near Disneyland. I could just see a tie-in with Mickey Mouse there. I'd love to see Peter V'landys next to Mickey Mouse with the Rugby League kicking off next season. It's going to happen. It's going to be Manly with Hugh Jackman's backing and the Rabbitohs with Russell Crowe's backing. Whether the Americans will take to it like the Chinese did AFL is another question.
Well, I don't think we should be mentioning anything to do with selling games interstate or overseas, Paul. We might have someone in the panel get a bit upset with us.
I was going to call it a Mickey Mouse concept, but it literally is. I'd rather keep the game here where people love it. The Americans have no idea about rugby league. They might think it's a bit of a spectacle, but this is our actual game. It's not an exhibition. It's a part of the season. So I'm actually would be more inclined to keep the game in our heartland, which is right here in Australia, but that's not me running the show.
Just on that, David, very, very naughty of you to mention something like that and suggest that St Kilda sold their game and may have cost them by losing by a point. So I hope the judge isn't too upset with you.
Yeah, I'm still recovering, Gelding, but Coutta, to be honest, given we love rhyming slang in this program, I would have thought the Chinese experiment was more like Donald Duck than Mickey Mouse. But anyway.
All right, Judge, I'll come back to you later because I've got a question sent in from a St Kilda supporter specifically to ask you, but we'll keep that towards the end of the show. Paul, a question for you. Who are the biggest underachievers so far this season? And I'll give you four nominations: the Titans, the Roosters, the Raiders, or the Sea Eagles. Who's the biggest underachiever out of that four?
Oh, not the Sea Eagles, because their best player's been out. So that's you put a green pen through them. The other options, the Raiders have been pretty ordinary. Who are the others? Raiders and Knights, I'd have to say.
Titans, Roosters.
Titans will probably make the 8. Roosters have been okay. They'll be fine. Raiders.
Paul,
you've got one of the angriest men in the game becoming even angrier, so that pretty much sums it up. I mean, Ricky Stewart's press conferences, they're almost too hard to watch.
He may need to start doing them from Fishwick, I think, Paul. But I think you look at it, Professor, and the level of injuries in the NRL this year around key players, I don't think it's been higher. You talk about those 4 teams, most likely, Paul, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you look at the spine at the Raiders and they lost their halfback and hooker for the season. Now, those two positions are extremely important. And I think you then look at the other one, Professor, I think the Titans. And you're talking about a player called Dave Fifita, who's possibly now injured. They just don't know what to do with him. He's on $1 million a year. He doesn't touch the ball. All right. Yeah. He doesn't touch the ball enough during games, and he's ineffective. And then the other night, Paul, we saw another centre who is talked about, and Tony Staggs, who scored one of the tries of the year, who wants to be involved and wants to get involved. So the Titans continue, I think, to be somewhat of a disappointment, Professor. As Paul said, they probably will make the 8, but I think it's a bigger indictment on the competition this year that there's 2 teams, daylight, and then you've got more daylight again.
The sad thing with David Fifita, that Miley Cyrus video clip with the wrecking ball, when he runs at full pace, there are 100-kilogram men falling like skittles, and he's fast as well. And it's just, I'd hate to be a Titans fan and just willing him and urging him to just get involved, because he's that good. He's just that destructive. And
the other night, Paul, I think they had 12 tackles in the 20-metre zone, and I don't think he touched the ball once.
No, and you look at someone like kick out from the Panthers, who's off to the Dogs, Professor. You should be very excited about him because he's similar size, similar abilities, and he's involved in everything. He does everything bar give the Indigenous tribute at the start of the game, kick out. So he does everything. So he's the sort of guy that you want at your team, Professor, and you're getting him next year. Interestingly, I'll get this in, Professor, very quickly. Matt Burton, your superstar half, is going to have a look at the market. And that's never normally good news when someone wants to test the market. He's got an option for next year. He's only just arrived. He's only just put the tracksuit on at Canterbury. He's already looking around. So no, I don't like that, Professor, at all. Maybe you might be in for Munster.
All right, Paul, 2 games for decision today. There's a game at 2:00, the Knights and the Storm. Who'll win that one and why? And can Storm score 70 again?
They could score 80 at the way that the Knights are going. They're paying Daniel Lead odds, so I wouldn't touch that. The Knights are just woeful at the moment. I got 3 out of 4 right last weekend with the very, very short-priced teams. Dragons let us down, of course, on those predictions. The Storm will win 38-10, I'll call that. I'll give the Knights some credit.
And at 4:05, can the Maguire-coached West Tigers make it 3 in a row?
Well, I'm effing excited about this game. As a traditional rugby league fan, if you don't enjoy these 2 teams playing well again, there's something wrong with you because they are not foundation with the West Tigers, but they're original hardcore teams with loyal followings. It's going to be a great game. I actually think that the Dragons will win, and I think it'll be a close match. So I think the Tigers have maybe run out of perhaps the lucky juice, but it'll be a great game, 4:00.
And final score?
Dragons 24, F-Bomb Tigers 16, I think. So.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. Okay, I noticed headlines in the paper with respect to the AFL trying to renegotiate a deal that they've done with the male players, trying to claw back 55 million or part thereof, and proposing to pay all or some of that to the AFLW. Quite rightly, from a legal perspective, the AFL players are saying, well, you negotiated that and that's our money. It's for payments for things that are in the past. How do you now renegotiate a deal? Sarah, what are your thoughts on the AFL trying to use money that they've already spent to put towards the AFLW rather than, as the AFLW players are saying, hey, how about carving out a piece of the pie just for us?
That's pretty much my thinking. I was actually having this discussion the other day with someone at work, and they were talking about how selfish the men's footballers are for not wanting to donate money to the AFLW. But that's not their job. They're not the ones running the league. They have their own jobs, and not all of them are the best of the best. Some of them might actually be relying on that money. They're not all on $1 million deals, but that was an interesting conversation to have because I'm in the same mindset, whereas why don't the AFL and the AFLW just carve out a bit of money to go towards those girls then? And the female footballers haven't turned around and kicked up in arms towards the blokes either. They're not getting angry and saying, oh, well, no, we should get this money and blah, 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 because they know that it's not theirs. It's money that already belongs to someone. It's a bit ridiculous. It's like saying to someone, oh, I'm going to borrow $100 and I'll give it back to you. And then 5 years later, they say, oh, I'll give you $70 and I'm going to give $30 to charity or something. Well, maybe the person who originally has the $100 wants to put the $30 towards something else, and that's amazing. And we see a lot of AFL players already donating plenty of their time to their corresponding AFLW clubs in coaching roles or just being supportive and getting down. I mean, Ben Brown's a big one. He did it all the time for North Melbourne, and he's constantly down at Melbourne training sessions with his daughters as well. But it's just not the AFLPA's job to be funding the AFLW. It's something that funding should probably be coming from the AFL and the AFLW themselves.
Can I ask what the logic behind the actual approach to get the 55 million is? Like, why would they even go down that track when, pretty simple, you know what the response will be? I just don't. I actually don't understand that. I don't get that. And what's the aim of it? Is it to put them in it. I actually don't get it at all.
Neither do I. And even thinking about it, I'm not sure if it was a large ditch attempt from Gil to try and get some funding towards the AFLW players or what it was, but I don't see why I'd even bother asking the question. Legally, they're obligated to give that money to who they owe it to, and those are the men's footballers who took pay cuts throughout the COVID lockdowns.
Sarah, I think that's the Gil factor could be close to the mark. That they've got this stupid dissent rule, which is to purge Gil's soul because he doesn't feel that he handled abuse of umpires during his presidency or CEOship. And so he's told his sidekick, listen, get in this dissent rule, even though, and the Professor and I talked about this during the week, that rule's illegal, let me tell you. I won't bore you with the details. The dissent rule is illegal. It's invalid. They should rethink it. And this one, I think, is a purging of Gil's soul because he feels that whilst he stood by and cheered the AFLW, which is always going to happen, he's taken it upon himself to take all the credit for it. But the reality is, financially, there's a hole. And so he just says, oh, look, bugger the contracts, bugger, what's legally the appropriate thing. It looks good if we can be seen to give some of this money to the AFLW. And it's just the wrong thing to do. But as we know, when it comes to sport, particularly the AFL, it's not the contractual legal issues, it's the optics. And from their point, the AFL's point of view, the optics probably look pretty good. Just give it to the girls.
Was Nicole Livingston involved in this at all? Do you know, Judge?
Who was that?
Nicole Livingston.
I think her name's Nicole Livingston.
Is it? Don't know, Coutta. Possibly.
Coutta, name was missing.
I haven't seen her name pop up, Coutta, but I suspect not. I don't think she takes the big decisions for AFLW unannounced and without being told what to say by the AFL. That's the impression I have.
In answer to your question, Coutta, there's nothing in the articles that I've read that names any AFL or AFLW official, although the materials clearly come from the AFL. And with a slant, in an effort to try and justify why the AFL have suggested this, there's a couple of throwaway lines in the material given to the media. One is, oh, well, look, these deals were negotiated in the past, but what we need to remember is that the AFL players themselves probably ended up the best out of anybody during COVID because of what happened to other AFL officials. Now, if ever you've tried to colour or turn people against a section of the community, there's one. They've just said, oh, look, AFL players have come out of this better probably than anybody else, therefore they shouldn't be getting this extra money. Well, that's got nothing to do with it.
Well, maybe did Gil come out of it all right as well? And the people at the AFL, they were all right. Well, weren't they through all this?
Well, some people lost their jobs.
Gil always comes out of this pretty well, it seems to me. So this is another example of him coming out of it looking rosy, leaving all of this crap behind him to be sorted out.
And Judge, this is all on the back of, over the last week, the AFLW has received significant press because of one of the biggest announcements in the sport, which is
the start of the next season.
Why are you trying to be funny, Professor? Please. More so, the fact that Erin Phillips has changed clubs from Adelaide Crows to Port Power. She wants to create her own legacy at Port Power, the club where her dad's famous for. And it's one of the great feel-good stories, but all of a sudden we're back talking about the pay and how AFL, we're just so, it's just, I don't know. I think at times we just get caught up in it, or the AFL gets caught up in their own importance. We should be looking at it going, right, we still haven't announced when the season's starting. We don't know when the draft is. We don't know when trade period is. Or sorry, they can do it at the moment. We've got 4 new clubs entering. Maybe what will happen is they'll go down to the local RSL on a Friday night, get the whiteboard out, have a couple of palmers, maybe some happy hour pots, and come up with the draw using the lotto.
Coutta, I was trying to think during the week about a good analogy. I don't do zingers like Paul Dalligan does, but I do analogies. I was just seeing a good analogy between the AFL and the AFLW. And the one I come up with is, the story of the frog and a scorpion, where the scorpion wants to go across the river, but he can't swim, and the frog can. So the frog, will you take me across the river? And he says, yeah. He said, but look, Mr. Scorpion, you're just going to sting me and kill me. And he says, of course I'm not going to do that, because then I'll drown. Halfway across the river, the scorpion stings the frog, and the frog's last words to the scorpion are, why did you do that? And he said, I'm sorry, it's just in my nature. That's what the AFL is like with the AFLW, and they will continue, trust me, they'll continue to disappoint the AFLW because it's in their nature to do things like they do.
Another one, Sarah, I don't know if you saw it, I might check on Twitter, is the Brisbane Lions, and Craig Starchevich tweeted about the first AFLW venue that the Brisbane Lions are building at the moment. Looks amazing. So again, success, they've had some success, but they're heavily investing in their AFLW program, which obviously for the state of Queensland, they may become the leader up there pretty quickly, Sarah.
Absolutely. And there's already been some really big moves in terms of clubs preparing for this. And that's another thing you mentioned before. Aaron Phillips going to Port Adelaide was a massive story. It was on primetime news, and you don't often see women in sport on prime time, but that move was up there, and it seemed to get clouded by that sort of pay discussion that keeps coming up, and it doesn't seem like it's being brought up by the AFLW anymore, but we'll see what happens next. But I am really excited to see, I guess, first the start date for the new season and then what comes with it, because there's just so much exciting development, because women's footy is still new, it's still fresh, there's still so much that can happen around it. We can see all sorts of new elements bringing up in clubs. You never know, maybe we'll see a women's only footy club start up soon at some point. There's lots at grassroots levels. And then what happens if Tassie get a team? What happens if Darwin gets a team? And it all just keeps growing. Even as an example at Hawthorn, the fact that they basically gotten Bet Goddard to coach their VFLW side the last couple of years, just preparing her and holding on to her, getting ready for their AFLW side. And they're another club. They haven't seemed to make too many marquee signings in comparison to the other expansion clubs. Port Adelaide's got a few Adelaide girls already. Essendon has Maddie Press-Parkis, and I think it's Emma Box from Carlton, who are two of their gun midfielders. And we know Sydney's already going to be in discussions with other giants as well. Hawthorn will be an interesting one to see how they go, but I reckon their coach got a few sneaky ones just getting ready. Bet Goddard doing Bet Goddard things, but it is going to be a really good year, and I'm just really excited to see how it takes off in the future. And
going on further from that, Sarah, and Professor, we've seen that Gil and his sidekicks have jetted off to the US about the rights deal. Gil's legacy will be the rights deal. Talking to Paramount, CBS, whoever it is, about looking after it all. Now, one of the most important parts, and we've seen it over the last 12 to 24 months, is the AFLW and the actual broadcasting of the AFLW. Now, if they do a deal where it gets shafted, could you actually imagine him doing this? That they do a deal that they get all the AFL broadcast live to whatever it is, and that the AFLW is just that little bit in it?
Yeah, I honestly don't know what's going to happen there. It's exciting to see that there's more women's sport getting broadcasted. Even things like the Super Netball is free to watch on KO on Sundays. So it's encouraging more people to watch it. It's something to engage with, especially if you're a family with maybe young daughters who want to watch it, but you're not watching much other sport with the program. I'm really just hoping it gets broadcasted, because as our special guest said before, if we get the word out and more people can hear about women and women in sport, more people are going to be interested. It's evidence of Ash Barty is a massive example. Everyone in Australia loves tennis, but not as many people are going to watch the Grand Slam if they don't really know who the players are. whereas I knew like there would be thousands of people who probably never watched a tennis game that Ash Barty wasn't in and tuned into that match to see her win, and they blocked out parts of their day to be able to prepare and have viewing parties and all that sort of stuff. If we can get big marquee players and like your Erin Phillips, that first Port power game is going to be massive. So we just need to keep getting the word out there and hope that that produces a positive outcome for us. And
surely they go showdown round one.
You have to. You have to.
And it's an absolute marketer's dream, Professor. Showdown round one, Erin Phillips makes her debut for the Port Power, and all of a sudden you would have 20 to maybe over 20 to 30,000 people there.
Sarah, I understand that Nicole Livingston didn't go off with the AFL executives to the USA to negotiate the media deal. Surprise, surprise. I just wonder if there's really any tidbits left over, any crumbs left over for AFLW, but perhaps we'll see about that. The Scorpion bites again.
Yeah, no, it's hard to sort of guess what they will do. You could 100% say there will be a level of tokenism in whatever they do to promote the women in sport. But just thinking about round one, you could have like the local derby in Adelaide, you could have one with the Swans and GWS, and a classic rivalry in Essendon Hawthorn now emerging as well. There is so much now to watch, and you can market it now with and aligned with men's footy. What's the fixture going to look like? Is it actually going to be if Hawthorn and Essendon are playing in round 16 or 17 in the men's, is that going to be round 4 for the girls as well? And we're going to see it sort of line up. Is it going to be like a go down to Punt Road and watch Richmond play Melbourne and then walk up to the MCG and watch Richmond play Melbourne? It'd be awesome, but we still have absolutely no idea how it's going to happen, what the fixture's looking like, how they're going to market it, if they're even going to put any effort into marketing it, because it seems like from an AFL perspective, there is still that element of, it's the women, we'll give them their shot, off they go, and people engage with the program. But then you look at the AFLW social media and marketing, and it's really strong and it's targeted towards people they want to bring in and watch the game. Hoping to see a bit more of the AFL sort of promoting the game and encouraging fans to support their club rather than the men's team at their club.
So, Sarah, I'm glad you've warmed up into it, because at the start of the program, you're a little bit shy around criticising the AFLW, but you've warmed up nicely. And I think everything you've just said there, anyone would be bloody hard to disagree with when the season starts. And even when you've got the stage where players are coming out in the media and saying, when's the season starting? What's happening? And the issue we've got is that you've spoken about before, Sarah, is that most of these girls have jobs. So what are they going to do? Hold their leave off when they put their leave application in because they've got to go and travel to the Gold Coast? I just think that's been really poorly handled, unless there's something going on we don't know about. But just get it done. The fixturing, they're just so.
No, even I spoke to Elle Bennett, who plays for the Bulldogs, and she's also played for the New South Wales Swifts in the Suncorp Super Netball. Spoke to her last night at a club function. She was the special speaker at Ladies' Day, but she still has absolutely no idea what's happening and has to schedule it around when she's playing her netball, and then she's also a high school teacher. So she's got to work it around playing netball, not at the level that she was because she's focusing more on football, but still when she's available, how's she going to get there? If she's supposed to be playing in Adelaide one day and then the next day in New South Wales, how the hell is that going to work? And teaching, that's not something you can't just ditch kids when they're supposed to be preparing for their VCE, ATARs. You can't ditch them for 6 months with absolutely zero notice. So she can't actually say to her school, oh, no, I'm confident I can handle a Year 12 cohort and give them what they need, because you might not be able to, because you'll have to go and play for the Western Bulldogs in Gold Coast the week of their exams or something. It's just, it's so hard bringing it together. And the AFL and the AFLW have done some good stuff. They've created their partnership program to try and link AFLW players up with organisations who are willing to work around their playing schedule. But even then, there's a line. They're willing to work around the playing schedule, but you want to give them a bit of notice so they can put together rosters or just work out where they're going to be sending someone. It'll be a hard one to like when the fixture comes out, because people are still going to say, finally, like, it's here, we've been waiting for it for how long? Or even this season that's starting in August, we really only found out a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago, and it's still all over the place. We don't know what these women are going to have to do next, and the worst part is neither do they.
Now, Professor, we always say gamble responsibly. I know we're about to head to the Gelding topic in a moment, but maybe there's a market out there for when they will actually announce the draw. Now, that could be something that, like Sportsbet bet on most things, I shouldn't say that, sorry, the gambling agencies have a market for a lot of things. Surely this would be one, wouldn't it?
Could be. What, Gelding, how would you frame the market?
Yes, there's many sporting agencies that kind of bet on these things, David, but I suppose that would be very much subject to information being leaked out. You know, not that the AFL do it, but yeah, there are agencies that will bet on that, the same as there's agencies that will bet on federal elections.
I mean, if you could put odds on maths, you should be able to put odds on this.
Yeah. So, look, it's just a farce. This, who knows when it'll be? Who knows what the market will be? Probably the favourite will be the AFL doesn't know. I don't know.
All right, Gelding, we might stay with you. Racing in Victoria today, the double Bs, Bendigo and Bairnsdale.
Now, Professor, I might have to have a talk to you about scheduling of the tips on the show, because, as you know, I've texted the tips through to you and some others on the show, and I hope they were on the first in Bendigo. Race 1, number 6, Tapple Capel. The race has just been run and won by Tapple Capel.
Oh,
so
well done,
paying $3.90 and $1.30, Professor.
Oh, they're not Daniel Lead odds.
No.
Yeah, so just like a sports bet, $4.20. So, yeah, pretty sharp.
Yes. Were you on, Giraffe?
I didn't have time. I've been too busy talking about rugby league. So, yeah.
Beautiful. But Professor,
and men can't multitask, of course.
No, of course. Professor, before we get on with the tips, perhaps there may be a story coming out of yesterday's races. The ride of Zeus in Adelaide in race 8, Professor, and maybe onto our subject of last week with the judge, the importance of jockeys. Would you like to fill the judge in on that one?
Well, the discussion last week was how much do we attribute performance to the jockey and how much to the horse. Zeus was beaten by a short half head into 4th spot. It took up a position last in the field. Certainly when I was watching the race, after about 600 metres, I decided that the horse that I'd put money on had no chance at all of winning and had very little chance of finishing in the placings. The horse finished like an absolute express train, but was so far back, it had to make up too much ground. Now, we say that the horse had the ability, but the position it was placed in the field gave it negligible chance of finishing in the placings. So if we look at last week's discussion, the jockey's riding of the horse had a very large percentage in the actual result. Judge, your thoughts?
Well, yes, thanks, Professor. As you know, I know as much about horse racing as I know about penguins, except that it just seems to me obvious that the jockey's a big factor. You guys think it's 1/3 of the race. That's a massive factor. And we always go into the horse's form guide. I'm advocating that the newspapers and all the other media outlets have jockey form guides about how their week was, how their month's been, how their fitness is going, how if they had a fight with their wife the night before, whatever. But I'm starting to think this is a massive factor, Professor. And
well, Judge, can I just chime in on your analogy? So that the frog and the scorpion, let's put them on a 100-metre race. The scorpion takes to the track when the frog's at the 90-metre mark. So the frog just has to shut three-toed slots tailed along to the finish line. The scorpion's 90 metres away. So that's the analogy for you there, Judge.
Well, I also like yours about the Mario karts. And as I said, I'm always on Donkey Kong, and he's useless. He's not useless. He's actually as fast as all the other karts. I'm the useless one riding it. So it's a big factor. It hasn't been said anywhere else except your show, Professor. But I think this is going to get some legs, this idea.
Gelding, you'll be pleased to know that the steward's report on race 8 yesterday is silent on the run of Zeust.
Well, you know my views on the stewards and what they do. Judge, just for your information, the stewards have to say that the horse has been given every chance to win a race. If a jockey doesn't give it any chance, they, of course, can suspend them. Now, a horse runs in 1 second, it will run about 6 lengths. So it runs 200 metres or a furlong in kind of between 11 and 12 seconds. Now, as Mark was saying, this horse, 400 metres from home, would have been eight lengths off the leader. So instead of it had to run the same distance, probably a second and a half faster over 400 metres than the leading horses. So it's just impossible to make up that amount of ground and was flying. And of course, 25 metres past the line, it's in second place, you know. So, and I suppose when it runs fourth means you get nothing and it puts you out of all parlays and things like that. So, you know, I think, you know, we were talking about 2/3, 1/3. That may be a little bit conservative. You hear the jockeys being interviewed and they say great ride for these winning rides. You know, we've advocated offering S-hit rides for some jockeys that, you know, they get 8 rides in a meeting and you never hear anyone bag them for their bad rides.
Gelding
Dropped the mic yesterday. We go to sale for a $150,000 race and get probably one of the worst rides of all time from Ethan Brown. He's replaced by Jamie Mott yesterday over the same distance, and the horse misses out on a $50,000 race by a head. John, that's because just the competence of the rides. You know, the horse's ability hasn't changed in 3 weeks. It's just the competence of the rides.
All right, Gelding, we better get your selections, otherwise we'll miss the next. We're
playing with them, Professor. Well, we'll go Bendigo race 2, number 9, Ballot Rich. Geordie Child's in fine form. Short price, but should get the bickies. Then we'll go race 4. Probably a bet for David here. Game to Love. Mick Price, Linda Meach. And then
not one for me.
Hey?
I'll give it a miss.
Freeder's starting for you shortly.
No more love for me. I'm outdone. No more bets. Keep going.
Yeah. And race 6, number 5, Del Rocio. Then we'll go across the Bairnsdale, Professor, where we like a couple. Race 4, number 3, Red on Red. Maybe that's one for you, Giraffe. A red on a red. And then race 5, number 8, Bishop Rock. So, Professor, good luck with the tips, but we've had a reasonable start today.
All right, panel, thanks very much for today. It's been a terrific show, and until next Sunday, a very good afternoon.